Hello plant lovers, Matthew in Melbourne, welcoming you back to my channel. Do subscribe. I post every week with tales of daring do about my orchid and unusual plant collection and how I'm managing to grow them here in Melbourne. So hit that subscribe button or like if you wish. But today, plant lovers, look at my Psychopsis. You know, I'm not a kind of I've got to have it kind of guy, but I saw a video about this orchid on Orchid Girl, Danny, who is one of the most amazing orchid YouTubers that you will ever come across. I'll put her link below. I'm sure you all know who she is. And she was talking about this orchid, which I'd never heard of or seen before. And I, registered and thought, that sounds interesting. Never seen them in Australia. Really hard to find. Anyway, randomly on eBay, I find one and think, I can't live without it. So I bought it. And it arrived. I'll show you that in a minute. The story ends well, so let's not get anxious. However, I didn't think it was going to end well. And then, randomly, months later, I saw another single plant available from an online seller that I often buy from. Again, you never see them, and there it was. And I leapt at the chance, bought it. Similar experience. I thought it was going to end badly again, as did the first one. But in fact, both haven't. But we'll get to that. I'm jumping ahead. And then just before Melbourne had its quick lockdown a couple of months ago, I went to do an emergency dash shop to go and buy some terracotta pots, as you do. And this was at the counter of the nursery that I always go to. And I said, oh my God, there's a Psychopsis in flower. I can't believe it. And the woman behind the counter said, yeah, most people don't understand a sequential bloomer, that you mustn't cut the stem. And the last one we had just sat on the counter for months because no one bought it. And I was amazed and delighted and clutched it as I left to go and prepare myself for the 5-day snap lockdown in Melbourne. Anyway, here it is. Okay, let's get to specifics about this one. An interesting variety from Ecuador, and it is yellow. So dark yellow and light yellow. Now the other Psychopsis that you often see have a much more mahogany colouring to the flower. So this one is a little more unusual, and it is called Psychopsis flavum. And I have learned that Psychopsis doesn't refer to the fact that it's crazy. It's actually named after Psyche, as in Eros and Psyche, because she had wings and looked like a butterfly, and this looks like a butterfly. Hence the name Papilio. The thing that's amazing about the flower shape is that it looks like a butterfly, and when it's in its natural environment, let's get some wind going, it moves like a butterfly would move. And apparently the bees in Ecuador find that very antagonistic and they attack it. And in the attacking it, thinking it's a butterfly, they pollinate it. So that's its pollination trick, which is extraordinary. But plant lovers, let's just get to the nitty gritty with this particular one, and then I will show you the sub-stories about the other ones I have. Anyway, here we have this one. So it is a species orchid, and it is an epiphyte they come from South America. This particular one is from Ecuador. As you can see, it has pseudobulbs, and then fairly sort of fin-like leaves. But the most extraordinary thing is its flowering habit. And the thing, can you see how tall it is? It's hard to keep it in the shot. The thing about Psychopsis orchids is that they are sequential, and this stem can effectively keep flowering for over a decade. Isn't that amazing? So you've got to be really committed to this orchid to not kill it and to nurture its blooming. So what happens is you get one flower at the termination of the stem, then that dies off. Now this just happened for me, that the original flower turned brown and the second bud was just behind. It was already quite swollen and it opened within a week of the previous flower dropping off. So that was quite a fast turnaround. So a sequential bloomer, which means if the flower stem can last for 15 years, need I do the math in terms of cost per wear, that this is an orchid that keeps on giving and giving. Unfortunately, plant lovers in Australia, somewhat hard to find. Care basics then, it is an epiphyte, and as such it will need a loose bark medium. And I haven't repotted this yet because I'm not game to, because it is still in bloom. Look at that, doesn't it look amazing? Isn't it moving like a butterfly? If you were a bee, you'd be attacking that right now and making that flower very happy. But you can see also quite how big it is compared to my hand, and these amazing kind of whiskery antennas at the top. It's quite extraordinary. Anyway, I will come and do closer shots of the flower. But it's an epiphyte, loose draining mix, as with most epiphytic orchids. The other thing is it is described as intermediate to warm, which means for me here in Melbourne, this is an indoor orchid. It is not going to rest outside. I mean, it could in summer, but you would certainly want to bring it inside the minute that nighttime temperatures started to get chilly. And you know what? I'm just not going to risk that. This is going to be an indoor orchid for me. But that is not too difficult. It likes bright filtered light, as do lots of orchids, so it's not difficult to place somewhere in your home, and it's going to like the kind of temperatures you like, so as long as it doesn't get too cold, you're going to be fine. Watering wise, as with most epiphytes, they're used to water passing past them really quickly, and they grab what they want and then they dry out fairly quickly. So it's not an orchid to keep damp, but it's not an orchid to let dry out completely. So a happy medium. For me, that means a little often, watering it just before it gets too dry. Don't let it dry out completely, but don't swamp it. And particularly if it's in a plastic pot, even though that is free draining, the water does tend to stay in it longer than a terracotta pot, which is what I will be repotting you in the minute I feel brave enough, Psychopsis. And fertilizer wise, I would be putting maybe once a year a couple of grains of slow release fertilizer into the medium, and then once every 2 weeks or so, a diluted solution of a seaweed-based liquid fertilizer, which I dilute to about 1/8 the recommended dose on the bottle. Don't overdo it, but as it's constantly in flower, it is probably going to need a little more nutrient than your average orchid. And as it flowers continually all year, that means it doesn't need a rest season in winter. However, if like me, you're in a colder climate, you might want to just ease off on the watering slightly in winter so it doesn't get too wet and soggy. Now I'll come in and show you, but what you can see quite clearly behind this flower is the bud of the next flower coming. So it is sequential. And I also have a sequential yellow, Paphiopedilum, which I will link the video up here that I made about that. Now that one had 4 flowers, I think, or 3 flowers, I can't remember. So the flower spike only lasted a year, but it basically was in bloom from July until past Christmas, which was a good 7 months. So that was extraordinary, and that was my taste of sequential bloomers. So I was just staggered, amazed, and delighted when I saw this one. Okay, now I've showed you the glory of the flowering one, and let me just show you that flower again because it's fabulous. Let me show you some of my other attempts at this orchid. All right, plant lovers, as promised, here are the 2 subplots of my Psychopsis psychodrama, and here are 2 other examples. Now, these are actually different types. This one is Psychopsis Mendenhall Hildos. There you go. So this one is the one that has the very mahogany blooms with the yellow. So quite beautiful, very different to the other one. When I had seen Orchid Girls' video about Psychopsis, I thought, obviously I can't live with that one. And then one just turned up on eBay in Australia, and you never find them. Anyway, I bought it, and you're going to think, who is this crazy guy? It was mounted, and it's mounted on a piece of tree fern, which, as you can see, it's a very dense fibrous material. Sensational, can I say, for growing orchids in a subtropical or a tropical environment, or in a greenhouse where you can mount orchids. But, plant lovers, I can't, because all my orchids either live outside or inside, and this is a intermediate to warm orchid, which means it couldn't stay outside in Melbourne all year. And it means that I don't have anywhere indoors where I could suspend something that was mounted on tree fern stump. So the first thing I did was soak it to see maybe I could break down the fiber of this tree fern wood to then enable me to extricate the orchid's roots and then pot it. No is the short and long answer to that. The tree fern stem is incredibly dense and completely impervious, so it didn't soften, it didn't disintegrate, which makes sense because otherwise tree ferns wouldn't be able to grow trunks. So I then thought, what can I do? I love this orchid, I'm desperate to make it thrive. So I kind of just buried it. I planted the tree fern stem in an orchid pot, so with aeration, as you can see in the side, and with a very aerated medium, which is really bark and charcoal and perlite in there, so it's very loose. And then thought, nothing ventured, nothing gained. Immediately the leaves kind of withered and died, apart from this one here. But you can see it had quite, and still does, have quite a healthy group of pseudobulbs down here. But I did think, plant lovers, oh no, I so wanted this orchid. It wasn't inexpensive and I've killed it. Now I have read that they sort of resent being repotted or moved, and you know, who knows whether that's true or not. This one certainly did. But what should happen, and I had just about given up on it, when this new and very fabulous leaf shoot emerged from the side here. I'm very pleased with this one. I'm also happy that the other one is a different color and this one is sensational. So now that it's still alive, I'm really excited about it. Again, so same conditions. It's got brightish but not too bright filtered indirect light. I water it when it's dry, but don't let it dry out completely. And I fertilize it once every 2-3 weeks, if I remember, with a diluted seaweed-based fertilizer. And as you can see, it does pretty well. Now with all of these, I do mist them at least once a day because I walk past them and there's a mister next to it, so it's just a habit of mine to spray it. But I don't think it's that finicky. This one didn't like transportation, but it has bounced back remarkably. It's very idiosyncratic planting. I would not recommend this for all you orchid specialists. You'll be thinking, who is this crazy guy? He's just planted a mount in a pot. But anyway, I have, and it seems quite happy. And you know what? I figured it's an epiphyte, right? And this is kind of mimicking the fact that it's perched in a fork of a tree and there's a little bit of debris and it's clinging and its roots are going in. So I think I've managed to replicate its natural environment in South America almost identically. Okay, story number 2. So I received this one mounted on a piece of tree fern stem that I couldn't get it off. All the leaves turned brown, it fell off. I thought, oh God, I've killed it. I was devastated. Then I saw another one online, and you never see them in Australia, but an orchid company that I often buy things from had one. And I thought, oh, sensational. Ta-da, here it is. Now, it is exactly the same type as that previous one. So it is the Mendenhall Hildos. I haven't been able to find out what that name might mean. I presume Mendenhall is named after a person, but Hildos, I'm not sure. Anyway, I was very excited to find another example of it. And then what happens? Exactly the same thing. Now I received it in a plastic pot, and as is my wont, the first thing I did was repot it into terracotta, because I'm a terracotta pot kind of guy. As you know, they evaporate faster. They're just generally better, I think, and more aesthetically pleasing. So yes, it had a fabulous new growth, and then something strange happened to it. It almost looked as though something had eaten it, and it just basically turned to mush and fell off. I thought, here we go again. It is history repeating itself. I killed the first one by burying its mount in medium, and I've killed the second one by just repotting it. However, I think, like this example, I'm not sure if they're temperamental, but I would just say sensitive, like the best of us. Anyway, what this one has promptly done, it retained its 2 leaves and it's got a couple of pseudobulbs at the bottom, so it's okay. But what it does have right here, I don't know if you can see, I'll come in and show you, is a beautiful new green spiky shoot. So I'm very excited about this. Now, looking at the number of pseudobulbs, I reckon they're reasonably mature, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if they were getting near to the ability to flower. So I'll be very excited if I can get either of these two to get to the flowering stage, because I did actually cheat. I bought the other one in a flowering state, so bad me. And as you can see with this one, I don't know why, but I always put a bit of sphagnum moss in the bottom of all of the orchids that I'm potting, and I try to keep the mix light. And with this one, I just decided to add a little bit more sphagnum moss on the top layer. So it's the same mix as this, basically. It's a light orchid bark mix with charcoal, with perlite, with mycorrhizal fungi, and a couple of slow release fertilizer grains in the mix. And there you are, Bob's your uncle. Again, keeping on the dry side, I give them all a bit of a spritz once a day. And this has rewarded me with a new shoot, so I'm very excited. Ah, plant lovers, what an epic. It's like a Venezuelan soap opera, you know. I thought one's dead, I buy another one, it doesn't die, the other one doesn't die, and then I find a third one with beautiful flowers. So there you go. Life is a journey, and my Psychopsis orchids are on it with me. There we are, plant lovers. Welcome to my psycho family. My psycho family of Psychopsis, which aren't, they're just sensitive, and they all decided to drop leaves when they arrived because they wanted to test my care and love. Anyway, they have all bounced back, and I am very, very excited with this whole new growth on this one, and a new growth spike coming out on this one, and the flower on this one. Thank you for watching, and thank you for subscribing or asking a question. I am a rank amateur, as you know, knowing nothing, struggling through growing orchids here in Melbourne, but I do my best, and I will certainly help if I can. I hope everything's going well wherever you are, and I look forward to seeing you next week with something else equally as exciting. So from me and my Psychopsis family, see you next week.